Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Thank you again for joining me. I want to talk about rounds, the length of rounds and the length of fights, because we've seen this argument rear its head again because of women's boxing. Women's boxing has made tremendous strides over the last 10 years. And they only fight 2-minute rounds. And they only fight 10 rounds if it's a world title fight. And the argument is should they fight 3 minutes per round? Should they fight 12 rounds if it's a world title fight or a European EBU fight or something like that? Well, I can see both sides of the argument, but I tend to veer on the side of having 3-minute rounds and having 12 rounds, because I don't actually think, how can I phrase this? Although I can't argue and would never argue against trained professionals who have devoted their careers towards studying neurology and physiology, I think that the reduction of rounds is actually relatively minimal. I think the emphasis should really be on fighters being protected from themselves with regard to the amount of punishment they're taking in a fight. So if that means the referee, fine. If it means the corner pulling them out. And there's no doubt we see fights that are blood and thunder and go on for too long, whether they're 10 rounders or whether they're 12 rounders. Now, let's go back 40 years, or roughly 40 years. I'm knocking on a bit. You're as old as the woman you're feeling, so I'm doing all right there. But no, that's another story. But the point is, if you're at my age, I'm in my mid-50s, you will remember the reduction of 15 rounds to 12 rounds. You'll remember that, okay? And the argument was, first of all, there was the argument about altering the future of boxing with regard to world title fights and using in a sense, making it a different game, because people were saying, well, if it had been 12 rounds when Rocky Marciano fought Jersey Joe Walcott the first time, Walcott would have retained his title because he was ahead after 12 rounds. Or Thomas Hearns would have beaten Sugar Ray Leonard on points over 12 rounds in their first fight, whereas Ray, of course, stopped him. Okay, I'll take that on board. But we are talking about a health and safety issue here and a safeguarding issue. And of course, if you go way, way, way back to the pioneers, there were 50 rounds, and I know that a lot of those rounds were very short because when you got knocked down, a round was over in some cases, or they're all the rounds existed in different formats. They weren't 3 minutes. There wasn't the 8 count if you were knocked down. It was the moment you were up on your feet, the other guy was entitled to hit you again. It's a different. Yes, you do alter the sport. You do alter the format of the sport. No doubt about it if you reduce the rounds, and certainly if you reduce the amount of minutes in rounds. But I have to say that despite the reduction from 15 rounds to 12 rounds, there have, of course, continued to be tragedies. So in recent years, off the top of my head, we've got Patrick Day, who was killed 3 years ago, just before COVID. Was it the year before COVID? 2019, I want to say. Maybe I'm wrong. And I watched that fight live, and that was in the 10th round, that knockout. And as soon as he hit the floor, I knew something was up. I thought, oh God, this is the worst case scenario, and it was, of course. Maxim Dadashev, the Russian kid, I want to say he was pulled out by Buddy McGirt after 10 rounds during his fight, and he had a fit afterwards and died, taken to hospital and died. Terrible, terrible tragedies that took place in far less rounds than 12. So I don't think it is the amount of rounds. I think ultimately it is referees and corners being extremely prudent about letting their fighter take too much punishment. And of course, we like blood and thunder as boxing fans. That's what attracts new fans. The kill or be killed attitude, the cavalier attitude of fighters. There's no way of getting around this. It's a combat sport. It is controlled violence, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise. I've heard people say, well, more people get killed in fishing than in boxing, or it's so what? That may even be true. I don't know. It sounds like nonsense to me, but maybe it's true. Maybe there's more people falling over boats and over the side of boats and drowning than there are people getting killed in the ring. But it's a contact sport. Come on, let's cut the bullshit here. We've got to be honest. Otherwise, we slip into the realm of being sort of insidiously disingenuous about the argument. And yeah, boxing is dangerous. And let's be honest, that's why we love it, because these are modern day gladiators. So I think with regard to the women and their 2-minute rounds, as I've said many times before, a world title fight, 10 rounds, 2 minutes, 20 minutes of fighting, only 2 minutes more than a men's 6-rounder. Okay. I think they probably should fight 12 minutes, 12 rounds, 3 minutes per round. And I think if they are monitored, if the fights are monitored with the amount of punishment taken, I don't think that the reduction of the rounds is going to make that much of a difference. Now, again, I'm not arguing with professionals who have studied neurology and physiology. They know more about it than I do. I concede that point totally. I just think when you weigh everything up, thinking back over the decades, I don't think the reduction in rounds is the main thing that causes tragedies. Now, you can argue that it may cause permanent damage long term, but there again, so does the amount of fights people have. And again, we're back to saving people from themselves. You know, ruling bodies, or in case of the UK, the British Boxing Board of Control, denying licenses to women that have taken too much punishment. I think we need to consider that as well. And, you know, the slightly, for want of a better word, libertarian side of me says, well, people should be allowed to fight if they want to fight. Yeah, but do we really want to see people killed? I don't. I don't think there's any place in boxing for people that do want to see people killed. I don't think there's any place in society for people like that, to be honest. But so, and again, you know, I mean, let's say Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano have been 12 3-minute rounds. Would Katie have got out of that 5th round where she took a beating from Serrano? I've got my doubts, you know. But maybe she'd have won the fight over 12, or maybe Amanda would have won it. Shields and Marshall recently, another great fight. I think Marshall would have stood a better. I actually, by the way, I'm one of the very few people who had Marshall slightly ahead in that fight. I think it was a very close fight, could have gone either way. And then I watched it again and I let it draw. So I'm not one of the people that say Shields won most of the rounds. I've heard people say that Shields won every round. Absolute nonsense. But anyway, that's another argument for another point and up for another time. Had that been 12 3-minute rounds, I think it would have favoured Marshall more, because she'd have been able. She was actually coming on very, very strong in the second half of that fight. And Carissa, warrior that she is, Amazon that she is, you know, great fighter that she is, hung tough. But had it been 3-minute rounds, and with 2 more to come, I think it would have favoured Savannah, even though Savannah was absolutely knackered herself at the end of it. So I do favour. I don't think there's any point in going back to 15 rounds for the men now. 12-3 seems to be where we've settled at. I do have doubts whether the reduction from 15 rounds saved lives in the sense of fatalities in the ring. I think it may have had a positive impact on the reduction of the amount of punishment people take over an entire career. Yeah, I can understand that argument. With the women, I favour 3 minutes per round, 12 rounds for world title fights. Also, when you're scoring the women's rounds, what I always do when I'm scoring a round is I break into 3 minutes. So the first minute, who's won that round? Second minute, who's won that round? Third minute, who's won that round? And then if it's either 3-0, 2-1. I don't ever go for drawn rounds. I just don't believe in. I don't score rounds as a draw. I just don't do it. And sometimes I get it wrong. Sometimes I watch it back and think, actually, I gave it to that girl, or that man. I should have given it to him over there. But I just don't think it's the right thing to do. With 2-minute rounds, you can't do that. Woman A wins the first minute. Woman B wins the second minute. Where are you? Then it becomes much more difficult to score. Although you can argue we see far less robberies in the women's game than we do in the men's. Although they do occur, of course. So this is an argument that's going to go on and on and on. I want to hear your comments. Leave your comments below. You've heard my spiel. I do favour 12 rounds for the women, 3-minute rounds. I would leave the men's at 12 threes for a world title fight. But leave your comments below. I want to hear them. Thank you for watching, as always, of course. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the like button. Subscribe. Hit the like button. Right cross. Jab followed by a right cross. Go on, do it. Costs nothing. Thank you. We shall speak again. Much love to you. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.